اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم الحمدللہ رب العالمین والصلاة والسلام علی سید المرسلین وعلی آلہ واصحابہ اجمعین اما بعد قال اللہ تعالی فی کلامہ المجید فإنها لا تعمى الأبصار ولكن تعمى القلوب التي في الصدور صدق اللہ العظیم. My dear brothers and sisters, for the next few minutes, I will speak to you about a very, very profound subject, which has been basically the focus of my discussions over the past several weeks. And that is how to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how to be able to realize that we as humans have very limited knowledge, limited abilities, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most powerful and has power over everything. How do we relate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What is the purpose of our creation? What are we supposed to do in our lives? And how would we find out if we are doing the right thing and not wasting our time here on this earth? We all know that we have come to this earth only for a short while. Our souls did exist before we came here, and the souls will return back to the origin again after we pass on, and our physical bodies will remain on this earth from which they were created. Now, I try to make this subject fairly simple, and yet it really requires tremendous introspection and looking within ourselves as to what really is the subject matter here. Basically, what we have to understand is that when we are born, we are basically born at a point which we can call a 0 point in life in terms of physical life on this earth. And we have to walk from 0 point upwards to get closer to our Creator. And a point can come if you become a perfect human being, that you really become so close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that you walk as if you are walking with His feet, with His permission of course, and you see as if you are seeing with His eyes. The little brief part of the verse that I have recited before you is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Hajj, 46th verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that these are the people that they are not really blind from the eyes of their face, but it's the eyes of their heart that are blinded, and they cannot really see. So there is something called eyes of the heart also. In other words, there is one universe that we see with our eyes on the face, and there is another universe that we are supposed to see with the eyes of our heart. And the eyes of our heart are the actual eyes that really are essential for us to recognize and open and make sure that we see things that are out in the universe. Now, how does one develop those eyes? Number one, you have to first realize that you do have those, and you have to make sure that you connect yourself to that particular heart that is within your chest. That heart is not necessarily the same heart that we see that circulates our blood, but that heart is something that we don't understand very much about, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in total control of that. And when we make an intention to connect to our Creator, and we think of Him and do His zikr and try to remember Him waking hours and even when we are resting and trying to go to sleep or whatever, and even at that time we should always remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching over us, and that we can actually think of Him and keep remembering Him so that He can watch over us when we are asleep also. Now, there are of course many examples that we can find in Al-Quran that give us strength to this particular belief. There are so many stories in Al-Quran that none of us can refute, none of us can deny, none of us can say that these stories are not real, in which we cannot really understand how these things are happening, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing it. Let me just say this particular story that is very easy for everybody to understand. When this person, which was Uzair al-Islam, whosoever it was, walking on a pathway going somewhere in the middle of the afternoon. Then he saw in the distance a city that was destroyed because of earthquake or whatever, a natural tragedy occurred. And thought came to him, to his mind, how long will it take for this whole city to come back? And what a tragedy, and this and that. He was thinking, and he was basically asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how will all of this happen, and how will this basti or this particular community come back to life? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that I put him to sleep, and he woke up, and I asked him, how long were you sleeping? And he said, maybe part of a day or a day. He said, no, you have been sleeping here 100 years. Look at the donkey that you had, on which you had your food. The donkey was basically bones, and all that had gone basically mixed with dirt. And yet the food that he had on the back of the donkey now was sitting there just as fresh as it was when he last checked it. So here he is basically the same that he was 100 years ago. Food is just as fresh as it was 100 years ago. But the donkey has been dead, and the bones and skin is gone. And he looks at the community or the city is built back and just like as it was before. Now I mentioned this story basically because a human mind would start to think, was that fair for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do? Why did he have to do that? This man had a wife probably and children. They never saw him after that. For 100 years they didn't even know where he went. This was not fair thing to do for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's one thinking somebody might have. Somebody else might say that how come that if the time had gone in 100 years, how come the food was still fresh and he was still around? Maybe it's just an imagination, maybe it's just a magic spell or something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did, and actually time did not pass by. That's not true. Time did pass by, but the question is, time could be still for something and be moving for something else at the same time, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has all that power. Now how come that we logically cannot explain it? It is because our logic is misleading to us. Or we have but little knowledge and little logic. We cannot logically understand so many things that are around us in the universe. And all we have to do is submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say that we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His word. And then once we have that, then suddenly we start connecting to our heart, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides us. All over in many areas in our Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Allah guides those hearts that He likes to guide. And if you want your heart to be guided, you really have to more or less turn towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with sincerity and with the total belief. Not that I believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and then all His attributes that He has, that He can stop the time for this particular element and yet have the time flowing for the other. All of that you have to believe. All of that you have to really say that yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has that power and He can do miracles. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does that not necessarily to the things, to the believers also, but to His other creation also. Others that may not believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even those people are taken care of, they are fed, and many of them also get these instructions. Many of those also get these kind of benefits from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy and His forgiveness. So remember the story of that Khalifa who saw the dream that there will be 7 years of drought and 7 years of plentiful and all that. He was not a believer at the time, although he became a believer afterwards. But when Yusuf al-Islam interpreted the dream to him, at that time he was not a believer in one God. And yet he had seen the correct, true kind of a dreams, so that he could be properly guided and he can then serve the nation, serve the people that were under his